Okay, Ms. Scheck, if you would,
Recording in progress.
thank you. I would like to call together the study session for the City Council for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for March the 1st, 2021. Thank you all for joining us. We have three items on our agenda tonight. First item is the draft 2021 resident survey. Our second item is a lodging facility licensing program. Our third item will be liquor occupation tax waivers, and then we will have staff reports and elected officials reports. And as we do with most of our meetings, we would like to invite the public to speak on any item that is on the agenda. So if you're a member of the public and would like to speak on any item that is on the agenda, you may do so now for 3 minutes. And if you would like to speak, please raise your hand in the Zoom format, and we will bring you into the meeting. And when we bring you in, if you would please give us your first name and your last name, and please spell your last name and give us your address for the record. So I will go to Ms. Scheck and see if we have anyone that has raised their hands that would like to speak tonight.
No, Mayor.
You don't see any hands raised. Okay, if you are joining us on the telephone, you may also come into our meeting. If you would unmute yourself and ask to speak, we'll be happy to bring you into the meeting. So either raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up, and we'll be happy to bring you into the meeting. Is there anyone now that wants to join our meeting? We've got some great information, some really great topics tonight that we're talking about, and we'd love to hear from you. But if we don't have anyone, okay, then we will close our citizens' right to speak, and we will go to our first agenda item. This is the draft 2021 resident survey, and I will go to Ms. Scheck. Mr. Goff is out of the city this evening, so Ms. Allison Scheck will be steering us through our way. So, Ms. Scheck, go ahead.
Thank you. I'd just like to introduce Marianne Schilling, Assistant to the City Manager, who's here with us tonight to talk about the 2021 Citizen Survey, Resident Survey, excuse me.
Okay, Ms. Schilling, take it away.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. As Ms. Scheck said, I'm Marianne Schilling, Assistant Manager, and I'm here to speak about the Wheat Ridge Resident Survey. This survey serves as the consumer report card for the city by providing residents the opportunity to rank and rate city services, local government, community amenities, and the general quality of life here in Wheat Ridge. The survey also gives residents a chance to provide feedback to its government on what's working well and also what's not working well, and to provide communication for their priorities for community planning and for resource allocation for the future. So, as you all know, I was here this time last year finalizing the 2020 resident survey. Due to the pandemic, we did pause the survey and decided to send it out in 2021 instead. So tonight, I'm just going to provide a brief reminder of what the survey process entails, and I'll go over some of the recommended updates from the 2020 version of the survey. So later this month, 4,500 randomly selected Wheat Ridge households will be sent a postcard and a pre-survey notification letter to let them know that the 2021 Wheat Ridge resident survey will be coming their way. Each of the households will receive both a hard copy survey as well as a URL with a unique access code, and the respondent can fill out the survey through either method. With households of more than one person, the survey asks that individual in the home, the individual in the home with the most recent birthday to fill out the survey, which is another way that the results are kept randomized in this process. So by sending 4,500 surveys out to Wheat Ridge residents, the city can expect to receive about 900 to 1,200 completed surveys during the 6-week period the survey is open. The city is mailing the same number that it sent in 2018, and which is 1,500 more than it sent in previous years. City Council can expect an update regarding the resident survey results during a study session around the June timeframe. So on to major updates. First thing that we did is we added a new question on page 2, which is question number 5 in the community services section. And this is a question that can be tracked over time. The question asks, please rate your community on each of the following, and it ranges poor, fair, good, excellent, and don't know. And this question, there's 12 responses, so I'll read a handful of them to get a sense of what these are. But it's please rate the community on each of the following. How do you make residents feel welcome? How does the community help new residents feel connected and integrated? Attracting people from diverse backgrounds, treating residents fairly, respecting individual cultural beliefs and values, welcoming residents from all backgrounds to participate in the local government and community decision-making process. So we have 12 questions that are all in a similar vein. In order to make space for this question, we did remove the 2 NRS questions that we included in last year's survey. We are at the recommended 7-page, maximum recommended length of 7 pages. And staff did believe that adding this new question would be valuable to include this year and also in future years. We thought that this would be a good longitudinal question to include to be able to get a sense of the community inclusion and equity component over time. So additionally, as we discussed last year, the Let's Talk program in community engagement tour is now well underway. So we felt pretty comfortable removing this NRS, those 2 questions. The second update that we have is a reworking of the policy question on ADUs. This is question number 4, which can be found on page 5. And this was altered from the 2020 version of this question to consider regulating both new and existing ADUs. This question, this change was made following feedback that we received during the 2021 City Council Strategic Planning Retreat last month. So the previous version of this question asked, to what extent do you support or oppose the city allowing ADUs? And the response options were ranged from strongly support to strongly oppose. The current version includes, to what extent do you support or oppose the city doing each of the following? 1, allowing and regulating new ADUs, and 2, allowing and regulating existing ADUs. Staff is aware that this question simplifies a much more complex situation regarding ADUs, but we did think it was a good opportunity and worth including in this update, an update to the question in the survey. Community development staff, they support the update to this question, and we ask that rather than wordsmithing this question, that council consider either moving forward with the updated question as it's currently written or maintaining the previous version of the question. So those are both of the major updates. And tonight I'm seeking feedback and direction on the current policy questions. So thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions that you may have on the survey.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go to questions of council. Who would raise your hand if you'd like to speak, ask a question, or talk on this? Ms. Holteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mary Ann. I appreciate the updates that are proposed in this. And the one thing, I like the language for the ADU question and don't really have any, since we're not wordsmithing it and I didn't have any wordsmith, but I would suggest considering swapping the order of asking the questions, about first asking about allowing and regulating existing ADUs, and then the second question being about regulating and allowing new ADUs, and in part just to reflect our conversation that we had at the retreat and that we're considering addressing them in that order. I think, you know, for people to think about it and recognize first that there are existing ADUs might help them know how to answer the new ADU question as well. So that's just my suggestion I have out of this.
Thank you. Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for the work on this, Mary Ann. And I'm glad that you guys decided to kind of rework the ADU because of the discussion we had at the retreat. And I do agree with the new way you've done it. But I also agree with Councilwoman Hulteen that I think that maybe if they're flip-floppy, just the one that's on the bottom is on the top, and then the one that's on the top is on the bottom. And it makes sense because that is the way that we had discussed addressing them in our community.
Thank you. Additional questions or comments? Don't be shy, raise your hand. Mr. Urban.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the invitation process to complete the survey,
Recording in
Chief
progress.
Jim Lorenz, and I'll go over to the chief. Thank you.
All right, Chief, nice to have you here tonight. And Division Chief Lorenz, thank you for being here, and take it away, Chief.
Evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you.
Recording
there
in
wasn't
progress.
Any meeting I attended, I don't think, where somebody asked what I was going to do to fix the issues around I-70 and Kipling. Certainly that has been an ongoing issue, as you all know, for quite some time in the city, but I don't think it's an issue that's necessarily needs to continue. However, it's not an issue that will be solved by one action. Tonight, I think we're looking for some direction and hopefully down the road some council action. Nothing specific tonight, but we're looking to get some ideas from council on how we might move forward with some of our ideas that, I have to credit Division Chief Lorenz with coming up with a different approach to our hotel licensing program that I think gives us a chance to make an impact in that area. Certainly the hotels are not the only issue in the area, but they are one issue. We certainly see disorder in the areas around our hotels in that area. We are certainly concerned with some of the business practices of our hotels in that area. We notice high calls for service and an overuse of resources, not only in that area, but specifically at some of our hotels in that area. Almost on a daily basis, I'm looking at our reports and seeing stolen vehicles from Denver, Aurora, all of the surrounding jurisdictions, including Wheat Ridge, recovered in the parking lots of these hotels. We've got ongoing drug activity in the area and sometimes in the hotel, thefts, and every manner of crime seems to be in and around that area. As you well know, this has been a concept that's plagued the city for quite some time. But in the same manner that this council approached the massage license ordinance that I think has been successful so far, we think we can do something similar with the hotel licensing program. So what we want to do is attempt to create a positive business atmosphere, not just for hotels, but for all the businesses. But those are our largest users of service throughout the city, and they are our largest businesses in those areas, generally speaking. So we want to continue to improve those businesses and those business practices. The licensing program that Division Chief Lorenz will tell you about tonight, we don't want to dictate the business model. I don't think we can to the businesses, but really we want to promote positive business practices. We know what the issues are, and we know what the negative business practices are, and we want to create a system that really creates a kind of a carrot and a stick for our hotels, where they are licensed, they are given a certain fee, enough of a fee that it makes it worth their while to pay attention to these programs that will reduce that fee under this program. And Division Chief Lorenz will talk a little bit about some of the issues around there, but reducing calls for service is certainly one of them. Investing money back into the properties is certainly one of them. Promoting security practices and potentially private security. These are all things we want to see from the police department out of our hotels. We think it'll make it, make the total atmosphere in and around the I-70 and Kipling corridor much more positive. So each business has this opportunity to either remain in a positive place or to increase its stature in our community and raise itself to a level. And tonight we're looking for your guidance, your insight into this. I know it's a long time coming, but COVID kind of put us on the back burner, but here we are tonight taking the first step. So with that, I will turn it over to Division Chief Lorenz. I think he's going to share his PowerPoint with you and go through some of the issues that we see in I-70 and Kipling.
Thanks, Chief. So I hope that Allie can share the PowerPoint. Do you have that PowerPoint?
Don't. I'm so sorry. Can I find it somewhere, or do you want to send it to me? You can. I've given you permission to share your screen, but I'm happy to do that for you.
All right.
I just need
now I just have to see how I can do that. I should have been.
I don't think it's in it. Did you send it to my email?
I thought it was on the agenda there, but
Oh, let me look in the folder.
that's all right.
I don't see a PowerPoint. Sorry,
Okay.
Jeff.
I've got it.
So at the bottom there's a green square that says share screen. Then you should be able to choose the PowerPoint. Please talk amongst yourselves.
There we got it now.
All right, it's coming up there. There you go.
All right.
Oh, great job.
Great.
Okay. So the numbers that we have are for the first half of 2020. We're working on some more at this time to update this, but this will give you an idea of what kind of activities we have specifically. These are calls for service at the hotels and motels in Wheat Ridge. We have almost 1,000 rooms that are able to be rented out in town. And you can see what we've highlighted is the, in blue, are those numbers that are consistently the highest every year. And you can see how those hotels rank all of these calls for service on this second smaller grid. This is dividing those calls for service by the number of rooms they have. So that gives us a percentage so that we can compare hotel to hotel. Some of them have a lot of rooms, some of them don't have as many rooms. So this is a fair comparison, and you can see that those numbers still come out the same, is that the top three calls for service are pretty consistent in our hotels. This is just a graph to show what how much is charged per night at hotels, and it gives you very basic idea that the more that is charged, that you'll see over in this area, you have less calls for service. You have more calls for service for those hotels that are charging less money, or at least that one right there in particular. This is a kind of a general as what kind of calls we get at the hotels. The most common call is an unwanted party, somebody that either the hotel or a customer there at the hotel has called and said, hey, there's somebody here that's bothering us and we don't want them here. We also have disturbances, welfare checks, suspicious incidents, and follow-up. Now, calls for service are a little different than what you'll see in the next slide. I guess I should also say that we're spending almost an hour on each call that we're handling at these hotels. So these are case reports at the hotels and motels. So this is not just a disturbance or something that just requires some kind of intervention by the police to kind of settle and move on. These are calls where we need to take a report, probably a crime or some kind of incident that needs to be documented. And we see again those same hotels in the top three that are very common. Here we see the same thing with arrests. We've had some 8,000 arrests from January 16 to June of 2020. And you'll see again those same hotels pop up in each one of those. These are the highest businesses in the city for calls for service. As you can imagine, Lutheran Medical Center would pretty much always be number one. They have 5,000 people that are there, so there's a lot of things going on at the hospital. But also in the top four here, or top five, are some hotels that pop up there. This is what arrests look like at the hotels. You can see that one particular hotel we arrest an awful lot of people there. So that's just kind of a quick analysis of why we have this issue. Like I said, we'd like to get the second half of 2020, get those numbers to you as soon as we have them available. And but it was anticipated that it's going to be the same as it has been. We're not going to see a lot of drop. Now, we have had one of our hotels, the American Hotel, has hired security guards. We had a meeting with them just a few months ago, and really convinced them that was a good thing for them to do. They did follow through on it, and I think we're just anecdotal check. It seems like we're getting less calls there. That seems to be a help. So I am going to stop sharing there. Are there any questions about what you saw there?
Questions, anyone? Raise your hand. Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have a question about the data specifically, but more about, first off, thank you for the memo and for finding a way to address this. I wonder if at any point we'll look at if there is a certain number of times that once a property is let's say a bad business in our community several times with things like drugs, human trafficking, stuff like that. How is there a time at any point when we would say we've given you lots of opportunities and lots of tools to get this straight and you're not going to do it, and therefore now we're going to take over that property, or is there anything like that 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 we're thinking about doing?
Ms. Hoppy, if I could address that, and I think Mr. Dahl will probably weigh in on this as well, but what we're looking for from council tonight is just direction to go ahead and with Mr. Dahl to sit down and write a draft on an ordinance. And potentially one of those outcomes could be, and we've started to use this in the city thanks to Ally, pulling a business license from people that seems to get their attention. So potentially if you fail to be a good business partner with this community, there might be some real consequences beyond just paying a fine, potentially losing your license. But Mr. Dahl is going to be in the middle of certainly anything we do moving forward. I wonder if he would have a comment on this as well.
The chief is absolutely right. The city has the right under the code to revoke a business license for any business that is found to be violating any city ordinance or code, or that is found to become a nuisance, as we've defined nuisances in chapter, I think, 15 of the code. Both of those tools are available that end up resulting in either an abatement process over a municipal court to get sort of a creative order out of the court, or a more straightforward, just suspension or ultimately revocation of a business license. So we have those tools. We're using them in other contexts right now, as the council is aware. And those tools are good ones that are available. But the chief is right that we start with, I think, an ordinance system that creates some measures of behavior that if violated, then give the city a better platform to exercise the license revocation suspension tools that it has.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional discussion, Ms. Nosler-Beck.
Thanks, Mayor. I might be getting out over my skis on this a little bit, but just thinking about that area, and one of the biggest issues that a lot of the current business owners are dealing with is loitering and damage to property. And I want to know if there's anything that we can do to, I understand revoking a business license because of, specific violations, but are there things that we can do to, help support the business so that it becomes a better functioning motel, so that we aren't dealing with potentially a motel going out of business and then we have a vacant building that we have to deal with. I just think that it's probably a good idea to think about this from the perspective of if we are going to revoke their business license, then what are we going to do after that if they don't comply? So I guess I'm just kind of throwing out all of this stuff. There's things for us to look at in ways to help support these businesses too, in a way.
So, Ms. Nosler-Beck, if I can say that what we're proposing as far as an ordinance really is kind of a carrot and stick approach, where we would support businesses, and we would, if the council agrees, we would have a schedule of licensing fees that reduces through good behavior, or if you're already a good steward of the business and the trust of the citizens of Wheat Ridge, you wouldn't really be penalized in that way. There is a possibility that ultimately we end up where you're discussing, where if Mr. Dahl is successful and we pull a business license, we have a business that's vacant at some point. But I guess the question really, maybe in my mind before the council, is, are we willing to live with what we have, or are we willing to push the issue forward a little bit? We've tried to support these businesses through meeting and discussion. That was kind of step one. We advised them that we thought that they should look hard at their business practices before we went in front of the council and potentially propose some ordinance, some regulations on them, some licensing. And really, we got very minimal traction. I think the only thing we got so far out of those meetings was the security that Division Chief Lorenz noted at the American, which is great in and of itself, but we've got a long way to go. And if the council's comfortable with the situation as it stands, we'll do the best we can to mitigate it. But I think for the years, I've been told 10 to 15 years this issue has been going on, we might want to take a little more decisive action, I think. Allie, did you want to add to that?
Well, thanks, Chief and Division Chief Lawrence. I was just wondering if it might be helpful for the council if you walk through the sort of program that you're proposing here before we continue on with questions. But Council, I'll look to you and Mayor to say, no, we're good. We've read the memo and we understand it. I don't know what would be most helpful for you at this point.
Before we do that, I have a question or a comment coming from Ms. Routine. Why don't we bring her on now, and then, but I would appreciate it if you might walk through a little bit of that. So, Councilwoman Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd actually be happy to defer my question until after we get a little bit more information. So, if we have more coming, I'd listen to that and then speak afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. So, either Chief Murtha or Division Chief Lorenz, could you walk us through kind of some of the ideas that you have in the incentive program?
Yeah, this is really Division Chief Lorenz's brainchild. I'd like to take credit for it, but it's his. And so I'd let him walk us through how this might play out. I think it does give us a different approach to this issue. Jim, do you have that document in front of you?
Sure. So the chief's very kind. We've been working on this for a long time, trying to figure out, not so much solutions. Right now, we're working on a strategy. So that's what we would call this. And this strategy really started in Lakewood. Lakewood, just a year or two ago, they started they have a new ordinance that requires calls for service to be low at hotels, and they charge different hotels if you have excessive calls for service, and they have a baseline number that they work with. And if you're above that line, you have to pay a little more. If you're below that line, you don't have to pay. That's basically where the idea came from. But I thought there might be some more things that we could do. We've tried a lot of things with our hotels, and if you have the staff report that I did, there are 6 solutions that you can find in the COPS. It's a COPS book that is distributed through the Department of Justice. And we've tried 4 of those 6. We tried the first 4. We've done extra patrol. We've tried to enlist community support. We've obtained cooperations from hotels. We have established and enforced minimum functionality and security standards. What we haven't done is adopt an extended stay lodging that our community development director, Ken Johnstone, had worked on in the past, and we have not adopted the lodging facility licensing. So this idea is also born from our recent ordinance with massage parlors. Let's do not just a regular city business license, let's do one specific to the business, in this case, a lodging facility. And if we do a license, what would it look like? What would we like to see from that? We would like them to participate and have some skin in the game, I guess you would say. We would propose a pretty high fee for that license. And then we would give them opportunities to reduce that by a percentage each time they would accomplish one of the goals that we're trying to do. So we've listed 5 different things that they could do. They could reduce their costs. Let's say we start the licensing at $5,000 to $10,000, and if they were to complete all 5 of these elements, maybe they wouldn't pay anything for the license. Our plan is to get them to participate, as the chief said, with a carrot and the carrot or the stick. You either pay or clean up the property, basically. So the things that we have suggested is that we have our crime prevention officers are certified in a national program called the Crime-Free Hotel Motel Program. And you may have seen that before in past years. We just don't get a lot of participation from that. It is some work. They have to work with our crime prevention officers in a variety of different things. Their staff has to go through specific training. And if they accomplish that, they get certified. And it really does help to reduce crime in this. It's a national program. The second idea is to get good scores in our hotel inspection program. Now, we've been doing that for a long time. We get participation in that because we get our fire departments, our fire districts to participate, and they have to work with the fire departments. So we get good participation there, but we use that as another way to make sure that the properties are inspected so that they're safe and not dangerous for people staying there. And that, of course, requires some expense for them to put out. And that's where the next one kind of comes into is one of the things that Ken Johnstone had talked about early on a couple of years ago is a formula to determine how much they have spent on their property based on building permits that they have pulled. And we can assign a percentage to that. You see the ones that have a higher percentage of doing that, putting more money back into the hotel, has less crime, is safer, and a better place. So we need to determine what that ratio is, what that number we want to set as a baseline, and get them to participate in that. If they hit that number or higher, then again we could reduce their costs by some 20% if we're dealing with five different things on the list. The next one is kind of the Lakewood model. Just this one thing is you get your calls for service lower per room. And if you get that ratio at whatever the standard turns out to be, then again, you could lower the cost of your license by some 20%. And then finally, what we've talked about with one hotel already, and they have agreed to do that, is submit a security plan to us, which could involve a variety of different things. It could be security guards, it could be fencing, it could be cameras, or any number of improvements in a particular plan as to how they would improve their security. So that's kind of the idea in a nutshell. Clearly, we have some more work to do to figure out what these thresholds are and how they would apply, and is this going to work? And what does council think about this? What do you think about kind of a high license, and then maybe they go the entire year, and then they pay up at the end? What have they managed to accomplish, and what would be the cost of their license at the end of that year? So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining that. And we've got a couple of questions. I'll go back to Ms. Hulteen and then Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chief Lorenz. That was definitely helpful. You mentioned briefly, but I'm curious if there's other cities. I think when we were doing the massage ordinance, what was really helpful was to have a successful model that we could be looking at. And I know you've referenced a couple of national guidelines and sort of toolkits that are out there, but do we have any metro area or other Colorado jurisdictions that are doing anything successfully with this? And then I have a second question after that.
Yeah, I would say no, or sorta. Like I said, Lakewood does have a calls requires hotels to have lower calls for service per room. So that's just one element of one of the things we've talked about. And of course, there are the national program that we talked about, the crime-free hotel motel, that's available across the country. I don't know of anybody that requires it in licensing or I guess, you know, it's up to the hotel. Do they want to participate or not? So it's not necessarily required, but it is a way for them to lower costs. But in general, the concept is kind of something we made up just to see, because we've tried so many things. We've talked to a lot of different hotels, and there are differences in cities. There are some cities that can do certain things because they have a large tourism kind of thing that we don't enjoy here. We have the hotels that people are generally passing through as they're driving down I-70. So we're a little bit unique there. So I can't really tell you who's doing this and doing it well.
Thank you. I guess my impressions on this is, with the presentation that you gave, we're really talking about, it looked like there were 9 hotels, and 3 of them are very, very problematic, and a 4th is somewhat problematic. And then we have 5 generally okay hotels that are running a fairly safe standard hotel practice. So if we're looking at, and I also very much recognize that this is a real problem, and that we would like to see, you know, better run motels, hotels, both for our city and for the people who stay there. I would really like to make sure whatever this is that we're not punishing, you know, La Quinta, that has a really great reputation and is where I would put people up in the city at a hotel. And I, to Ms. Hoppy's question, would really like to see, you know, how are we, you know, not just rewarding, but like, I'd rather escalate problem hotels than do a reward system, because I don't want to discourage good hotels and motels from looking at Wheat Ridge as a place to come to. And I'm worried that if we have this incredibly steep licensing with a reward system for not being a bad motel, like to me, it says we don't have good motels or hotels, when actually the data shows that the majority are good in our city. So I really like looking at the low calls for service per room ratio as an indicator, maybe for escalating licensing, as an indicator for your base license assumes you're good, and if you aren't good, then it's an increasing licensing fee from that. But we're very early in the process, but I want to make sure we're rewarding our good hotels, and not just looking at the bad ones.
Can I comment on that, Ms. Hulteen, if you don't mind? We're very sensitive to that concept. We don't want to punish everybody for the sins of a few, if you will. What concerns us is that we had a discussion around some of our businesses that might be able to artificially lower their calls for service, either by not calling the police or by other means, which would potentially, if we said, well, you know, there's a threshold or there's just the top 3. I'm not sure I don't remember what Lakewood's program is. I did look at a couple of other programs, and it was kind of, if you're in the top 30%, you get punished. We didn't want to do that because we felt like everybody could come in line. And if they did, we wouldn't have to, you know, charge the fees to anybody. But it is a balancing act to try and look at making sure that any action we take, any ordinance that's written, doesn't punish good actors, but it also encourages the bad actors to get in line with what the good actors are doing. So we're sensitive to that. We're certainly, you know, if the direction is to continue to bring something before the council, we'll do that with that thought in mind. It's been a prominent thought in our discussions. We're just trying to kind of head off the issues before they become issues, and we realize we've written an ordinance that ends up upside down, if you will, in the way we apply it.
Thank you, Ms. Hoppy, and then Mr. Miller.
Sorry, I was having problems with my unmute. Again, thank you for bringing this. I know that we had looked at this in 2019. I actually just looked it up. It was in June of 2019. And I guess my earlier question was me kind of tiptoeing or alluding to, can we have a bigger stick, you know, for those properties that they're more than nuisance, that really don't get in line. I think that this approach, which is if you're doing well and you're doing what you should be doing, then your licensing fee would be very low. But if you're not, your licensing fee will be very high. And you know, hiring a security guard is going to cost more than the proposed maximum of the $10,000 for the license. And so maybe they won't comply just because they figure it's going to save them money. But I think that we're on the right track. I think we're headed the right way. One thing I wanted to ask is, in the last time we looked at this, there was we were talking about like a significant criminal act, which was defined as an act that causes serious bodily harm. Let me get it over here. Serious bodily harm or death, or like a police officer who got severely injured at a scene. So I wonder if there is maybe in the lowering the calls, if there's also maybe the severity of the calls, something we could look at. If the calls are severe, then what do we do there? You know, what is our decision if there's a death or if an officer is severely injured on the scene? I think I just want to say again, I support this. I think we're heading in the right place, and I appreciate you guys working on this. It's important not just to, you know, City Council and everybody that was interviewing you, Chief. It's important to everybody in our community too. That corridor is the butt of many bad jokes. So I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, and Ms. Hoppy, with the risk of taking more than my share of airtime tonight, just two things. You know, I'll throw Patrick under the bus since he's not here, but in my conversations with Mr. Goff, I did discuss that, you know, even at $10,000, people might just write that off as a business cost. So what is the ultimate? And that's where we landed on business license and potentially pulling the business license as being a real motivator for some of these bad actors. Now that would certainly take a lot more to overcome, and Mr. Dahl would certainly be involved in that, but there would have to be certainly a big push that gets large corporate, you know, the owners of some of these hotels own several of the same type in different cities, and they don't live in the community, so they just want to see the bottom line increase, and that doesn't fare well when they see their business licenses potentially at risk, and I think that would be a motivator for them. As far as the serious bodily injury, you know, my concern with that is I think you could have an officer get injured or hurt at La Quinta or at any one of the hotels just because the wrong person showed up on the wrong day. I'm not sure that's the best. I'm not sure I would agree with the assessment that was previous. I certainly would be concerned about that. But if that is in conjunction with other criminal behavior, then yeah, that's sort of a cornerstone of our logic. But I think we would certainly have to remove calls for service that were, you know, that were normal course of business, and we'd have to look at criminal element. So we'd have to come up with a formula that looks at that, not just, you know, they called because people are on the corner every day. They might happen to be on a busy street corner, and there might be somebody who calls from that hotel on a regular basis and creates an appearance of a problem that doesn't exist. So we have to be very balanced about that, I think. So I think, Chief Lorenz, am I missing something on that?
No, I think you're right on. And I would also add that if you take, we've mentioned La Quinta also, and I'm looking at the list of these things, they already qualify for 3 of them. They already have good scores on an inspection. They have good improvements to land ratio, and they have low calls for service. All that they would need to do would be to have employees participate in a crime-free program, which is good training, and submit the security plan. And I would say a security plan can be different for different properties. Security plan at Lutheran Medical Center is different than a security plan for your home residence. So it wouldn't necessarily have to have security guards. I've just kind of listed items in here that we would look at. It might be crime prevention through environmental design, which they, even looking at some of these hotels, some of them are successful at that. So it would just be the approval of that plan. And I would say that at least one hotel could qualify in all 5 of these right now. So it's going to take some more research and looking at each place in particular, and finding a way to be fair and equitable in all of them. But I think it's a possibility anyway.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to share with the council that back in December of 2019, I had a tax hearing from one of the hotels concerning lodgers tax. And one of the things I learned at that was that a good majority, probably more than 75% of the individuals staying at these hotels are doing so more on a 30-day basis. So it's more of that extended stay crowd. And what that means is as soon as they get to that 30-day mark, their lodging is no longer taxable. So what we have is an industry that's causing a lot of our expenses and calls for service, but they're not really contributing and offsetting that with a heck of a lot of revenue. So, it's a difficult situation because a lot of these people are virtually on the verge of homelessness. So saying we have to increase taxes on people, on the homeless, isn't really a good solution. I think we all can agree that there's, a moral dilemma there. So having a robust licensing system, I think, is a way to counterbalance that. We simply just can't tax our way out of this. So I think that I really applaud the police department's thought into this, because I think this puts exactly where it puts the issue where it needs to be, which is the motel owners rather than the people in an individual staying there. I really think that this is a great program, and I'm fully support it. And I think that it's something that we need to look into. And I really like the idea of the increased numbers of calls would be offset with more fees or other ways to offset the cost of the police.
Thank you. Ms. Dozeman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a couple questions, and I kind of want to piggyback on what Chris had just said. I also appreciate that we're looking more at like a licensing fee, but no matter what, those costs are going to be passed on to the consumer. And it's a really fine balance discussing this issue, because we know that a lot of families in the community are staying in those hotels, and a lot of them are acting as extended stay lodging. And so one of my questions was to that effect, kind of like where we're at, or could you give us an update on the extended stay lodging like regulations and whether we're planning to pursue that as well. And then we just had a conversation about short-term rentals, and I'm not sure if short-term rentals would be treated as a hotel motel, and therefore they would have this licensing fee imposed on them as well, or if we're going to kind of separate those out.
So on those, I would defer to people much smarter than myself, either Mr. Dahl or Allie. They definitely have a handle on the extended stay beyond the police department.
Well, thank you, Chief. And I'll just say, I just had a look through the last time we discussed the extended stay, and DC Lorenz noted this in his staff memo. It was actually June 11th, 2019. And so we can certainly, and there was a staff memo that Mr. Johnstone, our community development director, put together. And then Mr. Dahl put together a memo with some potential options that could go in an ordinance, and I did not go back and look at sort of the outcome of that meeting and where. So I think, yeah, Ms. Hoppy, Councilmember Hoppy might recall where we left that.
Ms. Hoppy?
Yeah, it is on our future agenda list, and it's been there for a while. It landed on that future agenda list, or like the work that needed to be done. So some research needed to be done with different like outreach with hotels and motels about that. And once that outreach came back, it kind of landed in the beginning of COVID. And because we know that a lot of citizens are utilizing those hotels maybe longer than they would be allowed in the extended stay, and because of what was happening in our economy and in our community, it's just stayed on the future agenda list. We will look at it at a certain point, but we didn't want to, when I look at scheduling, I didn't want to bring it forward right now, because is it something that we really want to be bringing forward now when it could potentially put some of our citizens out on the street. So that's why it's still sitting there on the list. It will come forward. Ken has been doing work on it, but that's where it's sitting now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then as to STRs, I don't know, Mr. Dahl, if you're able to comment on the applicability of this licensing program to the STR program.
There's no question that these two kinds of operations are completely different. And STRs just, they raise their own problems, but council's worked through those and has a system for that you just recently adopted. There will be no trouble in creating a definition for the scope of this hotel motel program, whatever you want to call it, that excludes STRs, and I would absolutely do that. There's no reason to bring them into this regulatory scheme. We have a separate regulatory scheme. It's appropriate for that kind of business model, which is very different than the larger motels that we're concerned about. So that's not a problem.
And Mr. Dahl, I assume that the type of regulations that we're talking about are well within the range of historical pattern and drafting. And
yes, the city has.
It's done.
It's not unique. The city has plenty of authority to regulate these businesses with the kind of creative approaches that are being talked about here, and to link that to, among other things, the license, which is a really good tool, I think, that you've all recognized.
Great. Ms. Hoppy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd also like to mention that through this licensing program, we can create a healthier, safer, and more positive place for those who are utilizing our hotels for housing. And, they then become the victims of a lot of these crimes that are happening. And so we would make it a safer place for them. However, I did want to say in the memo, it had asked for council to give direction about bringing forward the ordinance for a first reading. And I think I would feel more comfortable if we were able to maybe bring forward a draft ordinance for a study session. And I think that council would probably be more comfortable to be able to look at it at that point and look at what the nuts and bolts actually look like.
Let's see a show of hands for consensus around that proposition. Okay, thank you. It looks like we have consensus around that. Chief, does that give you the direction, and Division Chief Lorenz and Mr. Dahl a way to move forward on this item?
Yes, sir. We'll get with Mr. Dahl, and we'll get a draft together, and we can have a discussion around it and see if it's if it's what the council is interested in.
Okay, and we'd love to see this back again at another study session then. Any other comments from council before we move to the next item? Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us, and I look forward to seeing the fruits of that draft and some more discussion on it. So thanks so much. Let's see, we will now go to our third agenda item. This is the liquor occupation tax waivers. Ms. Scheck.
Thank you, Mayor, and I'll turn it right over to our city clerk, Steve Kirkpatrick. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for your well wishes. I'm feeling much better this week. When last we discussed this, there were really two open issues, and I will openly invite Mr. Dahl or Ms. Scheck to step in and add to or correct what I'm about to report. The two open issues were, one, can we collect or do we have the right to just forego liquor license fees? The liquor occupation tax is not so much of a problem in that regard. The second question was, would it be an undue burden to city staff to refund the liquor occupation taxes that have already been paid this year to the businesses that have paid it, so they get the benefit and they're not punished for being on time, as it were, and then waive the liquor occupation tax for the rest of a 12-month period for the rest of the businesses? And the answer to the second question turns out to be, yes, we can do that very easily for a couple of reasons. Number one, there aren't that many of these businesses. I believe you have in your packet a list, and it's somewhere around 22 liquor licensees that would fall into that liquor occupation tax. So it is a very easy thing for the council to say we're going to forego, waive, remit, whatever the correct legal and accounting term is, the liquor occupation tax to every on-premises license consumption that has had at least a 20% drop in its overall revenue since 2019. So I would hope council would agree that we should bring forward and I'm told by Mr. Dahl that we only need a motion. This does not have to be an ordinance. There do not need to be public hearings. All we need to do is pass a motion that says we're not going to collect that liquor occupation tax, and this is how we're going to do it. Before I go back to the first question, are there any questions or thoughts on remitting the liquor occupation tax? Outstanding. I could probably talk for 20 minutes, but you're going to thank your gods, I'm not going to do that, about collecting versus not collecting the liquor license fees. The bottom line is the legislation that the state passed last winter to relieve state license fees leaves every clerk and every city attorney, every municipal attorney in the state with more questions than answers. It is not at all clear from the language in the statute, which we have read and reread and highlighted and kicked around, etc., whether we have to collect the state license fee, send it to them and let them return it to, or can we forego it and not send it? And the issue is, without clear guidance from the Liquor Enforcement Division, we could find ourselves in a position where we're on the hook for those license fees. And it would not be $15,000 or $20,000 because of a $500 new license fee, we keep $75. That's what adds up to our $16,000 a year annual revenue. The other $425 goes to the state. So that's not a risk, the fiscal risk that we want to be running. We also found out that the Liquor Enforcement Division has no appetite whatsoever for clarifying what we should do, for giving us any procedures on how to implement the statute. I have written to people at the Liquor Enforcement Division several times, and if I get an answer back, what I get is something that's obviously a template Word document jumped into an email, and no one will put their name on it. Now, I'm sorry, but where I went to school, that's not professional. But the bottom line is we could continue to churn this until the end of time. To save our business of $17,000, I don't think that makes any sense. So what I would propose is we bring you a motion that alleviates the liquor occupation tax and does not address the liquor license fees at this point in time, unless and until we can get something clarified. Because candidly, we're going to spend $50,000 trying to save somebody $17,000 if we're not careful here. So I would be delighted to hear what Mr. Dahl or Ms. Scheck has to say to add to that, or have any questions from council.
Mr. Dahl.
I agree with City Clerk on focusing the attention on the liquor occupation tax. That's money that's only within the city council's control. As was pointed out, 85% of the local licensing authority that we assess is required to go back to the old age pension fund. And that may well be the reason the Liquor Enforcement Division has been unable or unwilling to say whether we can waive that locally, even though it's not our money, it's state money. And the city clerk is absolutely right. My advice is that unless we can get that clear direction, I don't want to put the city in the position of not collecting money and then having the old age pension fund tap us on the shoulder and say, where's all that money that you were required to collect? So there's just no reason to go there. The city's fraction of local licensing fees are so small that it is not worth pursuing. So that for the licensing fees. On the occupation tax, I agree that it's a motion. I've thought about that some more though, and remembered that when we did the business grant program to assist businesses, you might recall that I told the council about the importance of establishing a public purpose for the expenditure of government money in aid of private businesses, which typically isn't done unless it's a sort of an organized business incentive program system that you have a lot of findings around. And we did put findings together to support that business grant program that went through the several rounds that Councilmember Urban worked on so hard. And so what I'm going to say is that we can certainly put this on the agenda for your next meeting. And I'll prepare a resolution, though, that at least tells a little bit more of the story, establishes the good public purpose for the city spending city money to support individual private businesses, which you can do if you lay the groundwork. I'd like to lay the groundwork a little better than just the oral tape of a meeting at which a motion was passed. And so I'd like to tell the story a little better in a resolution, but that can be done easily. The key aspect for the resolution will be what are the criteria that are applied to either grant or not grant the waiver of the liquor occupation tax. And I've been making notes. I can certainly work with the city clerk and staff. So far I've heard that it's got to be for on-premises sale and for a 20% drop in revenue over the 2019. We can do that. And if there are other kind of criteria that have to be satisfied before that waiver is, that it's eligible for that waiver, we can crank that into the resolution. That way the resolution creates a good guideline and little mini program to be waiving these funds. So I can do all
that. The other thing I would add to that is Liquor Enforcement Division is both unable and unwilling to help us. In case you missed it, I'm not real happy with them right now. And I'm not a Lone Ranger by any stretch.
I wanted to let Steve, say that. So.
All right.
They're awful.
Sheck, I'm going to bring you in first, and then Mr. Miller, and then Ms. Hoppy.
Great. I just wanted to make sure council knew that since our last study session on this, staff has gotten together and put together a nice, simple, clean application process for the on-premise businesses to apply to. It's an online form. It's very simple. Again, we've come up with a really good way to refund anyone that's paid this in 2021. We'll do that by ACH as one batch. So there'll be a deadline to apply for the program, just like we've done with all of our programs so far. This will look very similar to our other programs. And we'll do some direct outreach to the businesses that qualify to make sure that they know this is coming. So I just wanted to add that to the city clerk's awesome presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. I also want to thank Robin Eaton for the extensive work he has done on this, because he has carried this ball from the beginning. What I've done is very little compared to what he and folks in finance and, sorry, I want to call her Allie, Ms. Scheck has done in the last several months to make this work. So credit where credit is due.
Thank you, Clerk Kirkpatrick. All right, let's go to Mr. Miller and then Ms. Hoppy.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe Allison, Ms. Scheck, answered the question. It was more on the lines of, was this a full-blown refund, or is it more like a rebate program where you have to apply for to get your refund back if you've already paid?
It's it's by application. So just like we did for the sales tax deferment or the business stability grants, we'll do it on an application basis, and then we will refund or rebate. It won't be automatic. They'll apply, and then if they qualify and have paid this year, rather than a look forward that you might recall we talked about last time, we provided they fill out the right forms for ACH, we can make that happen as a refund or rebate. And it's actually very important in the resolution that we note that, so that this isn't considered any kind of stimulus payment that has tax implications for the business later on.
And the criteria primarily is a 20% reduction in revenue.
Yeah, on premise, 20% reduction over 2019, or compared to full cost if they're a new business.
So Chris, the whole purpose here is the on-premises licensees. And of the 75 or so liquor licenses operating here, I think Robert told me it's a total of 32 that are on-premises consumption licensees. I may have that number wrong.
I think it's 42 city clerk. No, it's fine. I'm sorry. I don't that's what's in the staff memo, and then that's the list that's there. So it's
so of that number, quite a few of them are not going to qualify on that income reduction. But we know of a couple of restaurants that have appeared on national TV shows that will remain nameless, whose business has doubled since the last time they were looking at the future. And they're not the only ones. But then there are some, for instance, on the other end of the scale, we have a liquor licensee at Gold's Marketplace, whose business has suffered dramatically because you can't get there from here. So it runs the spectrum, but it won't be all of the on-premises licensee, but just most of them. I hope that helps, Chris.
It definitely does, and I appreciate the city is targeting those businesses that are hurt most by the business interruption and so on and so forth. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Ms. Hoppy.
I think Ali already kind of clarified it, but it's for 20% loss of revenue over the year before, and if you opened in 2020, you are still eligible to ask for this to come back, and the ask will be your projections of what you thought you would be doing in 2020, and then I just wanted to make note that in the memo, the total potential total, if everyone qualified, the potential total of revenue that we would as a city would lose from this is only $36,100. But I think that it goes a long way to help our businesses and also let them know that we're still supporting them.
Thank you. Ms. Holteen.
Thank you. I have a question. So the memo states that the waiver would last from April 1st to March 31st. So can you provide clarification about how that gets prorated, because we're in 2 different calendar years there? So yeah, if you could just speak to that, and because I'm a little confused about what does 2022 look like under that program?
Ms. Scheck?
Yes, thank you for the question, Councilor Holteen. I think the confusion here is that originally the last discussion we had was that this would be a look forward program, so April 1st through next March. And that was the consensus you provided, and that's where that's noted. But we've sort of done our homework and said, we'd much prefer to give good businesses that paid on time their money back, especially as we are talking about a number that we can manage. It's actually quite a lot of work actually to rebate and refund, and not that we're afraid of hard work, but we want to be clear about the staff time. And we've come up with a really a good process to do that. So it would be a calendar year. It would just be the 2021 calendar year. And so liquor occupational tax would once again be due January 1st of 2022 for the year 2022.
Okay, so in the memo where it says waiver will last from April 1st, 2021 to March 31st, 2020, that's really through this December?
Yeah, is that under the section prior action?
Yes. Oh, yeah, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Does that
Okay,
make sense?
good.
I realize it's confusing. Yep.
Anytime we talk about anything taxes, like part of my brain just goes away. So
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
Okay, additional discussion on this item number 3. Urban?
I'd just like to move a consensus forward that we're bringing this forward in the form of a resolution at the next council meeting.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, it looks like we have support for that. Are there any more directions that you need, or does that give you the marching orders that we need?
I'm really on solid ground here, but I'm not the one that has to walk this through. So I'll ask Jerry and, Mr. Dahl and Ms. Scheck to answer that question.
You can call me Allie, and I believe we're good. Is that correct, Mr. Dahl?
We are good. We have everything we need to put together a resolution, and we'll do so.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ally, Jerry, and Clerk Kirk for your work on this item. We look forward to seeing this, I believe, at next week's meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks so much. So we will complete then agenda item number 3 on our agenda and go to number 4, staff reports. Ms. Scheck.
Just one item tonight, Mayor. Thank you. This morning we had our weekly COVID response team meeting, and I told our city emergency manager that I hope she shows up next Monday with better news, because we learned today that there was quite a spike over the weekend. And so in cases here in Jeffco, and as you know, we all moved into yellow last week. So this is just a plea from the city, from staff, from me, to residents and to us all to continue our good practices that we've gotten the habit of, with wearing masks and washing hands and social distancing. And the city we are putting out messaging to that effect, that this is really important that we continue these good practices. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I just wanted, we went into level blue this last.
Sorry, we went into blue. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
That's correct.
And,
you know,
from yellow.
All the colors of the rainbow get a little confusing.
Thank you. Thank you for correcting me on that.
Okay.
But yeah, there's a real concern that we may be put back in yellow.
Okay, well, let's be careful.
Thank you.
All right, elected officials reports. Just raise your hand if you've got something you'd like to share with the group. Clerk Kirkpatrick.
2 quick things. 1, I'm telling anyone who will listen, this Friday, and I would invite Ms. Allison to tell us if I've got this right. The county is going to put up a webpage where residents can go to one place and find out where there are appointments for vaccines available. They still have to go online to do it, so that small percentage of our residents who don't use smart devices or computers are still going to need help. Nonetheless, there will be one place you can go and take care of that instead of doing what we've been doing up to now, which is registering in 8 or 9 places. Second, I noticed on next Monday's agenda, we are going to present a proclamation for Women's History Month and International Women's Day. That organization has suggested that to support their effort, we wear something purple. So I'm suggesting that next Monday night at the council meeting, all of us remember to wear something purple, preferably from the waist up so we can actually see it on the Zoom format, to show our support for that effort. And I plan to do it, and I hope you will as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Clerk Kirk. Additional elected officials matters before we wrap up our meeting tonight. Anything else anyone would like to bring forward? Ms. Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make a note that I've had coyotes in my neighborhood. I've seen them at 5:30 at night and also at 11:45 in the middle of the day. So watch your little animals, the kids, and just be on the lookout because they're out there.
Very good. That's not just District 1, I'm sure. Okay, anything else for the good of the order? All right. Well, thank you all for very much for being here tonight. Some good discussion. Thank all of our viewers that tuned in. We appreciate you joining us. We will be at a regular meeting at 7 o'clock on March the 8th at the Zoom format. And until then, please stay safe with yourself and your neighbors. Practice good social distancing and stay away from folks. We're getting this vaccine and we're getting through this pandemic. So thanks so much. We will adjourn our meeting. Good night.